the board and make a closing statement. We will let you know if the time is becoming an issue and if there is a need to pick up the pace of response. As the board hears from each candidate and weighs this critical decision, it will be doing so through the lens of the candidate profile that was developed with considerable input from our stakeholders. Our intent is to identify the candidate that best fits this profile, which board members have at hand. Audience feedback may be submitted by those who are present on the form located on the table at the entrance. Those participating virtually may provide feedback electronically by the way of the link provided for this purpose. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we value and consider the input of our stakeholders in the process. So welcome, Mr. Adams.
Welcome. Good evening.
Yep. We will run roll call. And Mr. Middlestat, are you able to take roll, please?
Yes, I will. Ms. Burkmeyer,
I am here.
Mr. Moses,
Mr. Moses is excused.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Ms. Knox,
Here.
Mr. Richards,
Here.
Mr.
Here.
Drew,
Here.
Mr. Middlestat, New Baltimore.
Thank you, sir. So welcome, Mr. Adams.
Thank you.
All right, we will start off with our opening questions. I will begin. Dr. Adams, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members here and those viewing from home have not. If you could please review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
Sure. First of all, thank you. It's an honor to be here this evening and to be considered to lead such a wonderful district. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm excited to be here and potentially lead the Anchor Bay District. And I'd like to start out by going back to the beginning. I was raised a son of a Detroit firefighter on the east side of Detroit, and spent a lot of time during those days playing, being outside with kids, with mentors, with coaches. It was back in the days when you'd leave and come back when the streetlights came on. It was long ago, but that was the era that I was raised in. And it became apparent to me at an early age about what a great influence mentors and coaches and adults in the life of children and kids were at that time. I didn't recognize it and couldn't articulate it at that time, but I look back now and it was, those were the seeds. And when I went to high school, as we all have in our high school careers, we've all had experiences with moving, powerful experiences with teachers, coaches, as well as ones that are damaging and maybe less joyful. And I had those too. And as I was in high school, those influences started to weigh upon me, and it made an impression upon me that I wanted to be the influence that sometimes I had and sometimes I didn't have. When I went to college, I went to the University of Detroit, played baseball at the University of Detroit and graduated with a degree in English. And it was there that I started to formulate my desire to be a teacher and a leader, and to be that influence with kids that I had and sometimes didn't have. When I graduated from the University of Detroit, I was fortunate enough to sign a professional baseball contract with the Chicago White Sox, and ended up playing 8 years of professional baseball. And during that time, I competed at a high level and experienced a lot of failure, as does come with high-level competition. And it really became cemented in me at that time when I was playing professional baseball. A few individuals had an enormous, profound impact on me and really turned my life around in some states, in some instances. when I finished playing professional baseball, I came home, married my high school sweetheart, and it was really difficult at that time to secure a teaching job and a coaching job. So I went to law school. Went to law school, and I went to law school because an undergrad professor had told me at one time, I think you should consider law school, going back to that influence that teachers and mentors had on me. And so I spent a year at Detroit College of Law, which right now I think is center field of Comerica Park. They tore it down. But at the end of my first year of law school, I was approached by an old coach of mine who asked me if I wanted to interview in Walled Lake for a teaching job, coaching job. And I did not know where Walled Lake was, but he gave me directions and I went out, interviewed, and I got the job. And at that time, I spent 5 years in Walled Lake. I coached, was a head varsity coach in all 3 sports, was an English teacher, yearbook advisor, and made wonderful relationships with those students and those teachers. Some of those students I still are in contact with me today. It was a marvelous time. But we began to raise a family, and my wife and I had to make a decision either to move out because I was living on the east side, or to get a job closer to home. So on a whim, I wrote a letter to a principal at Warren Mott, which is close to my house, asking for an interview. I got the interview. I ended up spending 10 years at Warren Mott, eventually became the principal there. And again, that was a unique time in my life because we got a chance to develop systems to support predominantly those children that were coming over from the Iraq War. And we had a great experience with providing for them. And it really, as a leader, kind of honed my skills at that time. As we were raising our family, I had an opportunity after 10 years at Warren Mott. I went to De La Salle for 11 years. I spent 11 years there in charge of the whole system, a remarkable time. It was influential with me because it was a chance to understand how mission should drive everything and how mission should be at the core of everything in terms of serving students, serving kids, and developing teachers. And then the last 5 years I've been at Roseville High School. And Roseville High School has been a wonderful opportunity to serve students that need structure and that need support. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to develop systems there to support and support those students at Roseville High School. Along the way, I earned my master's degree at Wayne State, my specialist degree at Wayne State, and my doctorate in educational leadership from Oakland University. My wife and I have raised 4 children. My oldest daughter is getting married in May. And I think that based on my experience and my drive, that I know that I can support the kids at Anchor Bay. I can support the community at Anchor Bay, and I can serve the board at Anchor Bay with all of my heart. Thank you.
Given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical challenges our district will need to address? And how would your background and skills help us address those challenges?
Well, first, when I reviewed the data from IDEX about the district and the comparables, the 8 or 9 districts that are compared when you run an IDEX report, there's a lot of wonderful things going on in Anchor Bay. I think the biggest challenge is to maintain a lot of the great things that are going on here. Obviously, the test scores are the highest in the county. When you look at the challenges in terms of data, there are some things that speak to me in terms of what questions I would ultimately ask. I know you've got the elementary feeders, and how many students matriculate to the junior highs from each of those elementary feeders. I'd be curious in knowing that, because when you look at the data, it begs that question. But I think the biggest challenge, one or two biggest challenges, is to develop trust and to develop relationships. I think developing trust with the board is number one. I think it's paramount that the trust between superintendent and board is really what's going to drive how well we serve the community, we serve our children. So I think the challenge is to do that. And I think the challenge also is to get to know the kids in the district, especially, and the parents in the district, and what drives them, what drives their needs, and where they're at. Because I think the superintendent, in terms of a challenge coming in, I think the superintendent needs to be, you need to have faith that the superintendent is going to be in the community, going to be accepted, going to be respected, going to be trusted, and that is going to be the ability to carry on the great things that are going on right now in the district. The data, I think the data speaks to the great job and the great district that you do have, but I think that all of that data at a micro level can beg some questions and promote conversation. And I think those conversations will be more robust if there's trust there, if there's respect between the superintendent and the board.
What are the immediate challenges you would expect to face? And given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on July 1st and ensure that we're fully prepared for a positive, productive school year.
Well, I think number one, in my opinion, when you come in to hit the ground running, a new superintendent doesn't necessarily try to find out what's wrong with the district. This is a wonderful opportunity to come into a district that is doing a lot of things that are done right, and there's robust community support, and the kids are succeeding, albeit on a lot of levels. So I think the mistake a superintendent would have is to come in and find out things that need to be fixed and that are wrong, or that need tweaking. I think the challenge is to hit the ground running, is to accentuate and to validate and to support those things that are going right. The district is obviously doing something, and the teachers are obviously doing something very, very significant at the elementary level. The scores bear that out. And I think that a new superintendent coming in has to acknowledge that and validate that indeed those teachers at that level are somehow doing great things with our kids, and supporting teachers on a whole. And I think that the new superintendent coming in, teachers will know whether the new superintendent is competent. The teachers will know whether the new superintendent can lead. And it'll take a very, very short time for that to become apparent. So I think that developing that relationship with the teachers, validating those great things that are going on, particularly at the elementary level, but all through the system, and not to go into a Mr. Fix-It mode at the beginning is paramount.
Thank you.
Want to get a drink? Are you okay to move on?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good evening, Dr. Armas. My name is Patrick Crane. I'm the Board of Education. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us tonight.
Thank you.
Got a couple of questions for you. Maintaining healthy relationships with school and community stakeholders is important to the Board of Education. Please share with us how you have gone about building and maintaining successful relationships with all members of the school community.
Well, first of all, I think that trust is a function of competence and transparency. And I've learned that through my career. Trust is integral and it's key to developing relationships with the community members. Because if they trust you, that relationship will blossom. If they don't, it won't. If it blossoms, then on behest of the kids in the district, that relationship is going to foster good things for our kids. And so what I've done in the past, especially with parents, is to be very, very transparent with parents with respect to what's supposed to go on with the education of their children. And that means that showing them the systems that we built, the expectations that they should have, and really talk the lingo that we use in the educational forum and educate parents so that they can ask those questions, not only of administrators, but of teachers, and have a meaningful conversation. And that develops a rapport with parents. In the community, I think it's important to, for instance, with police and fire chiefs or business leaders, it's very, very important that that you express and they understand the buy-in that you have with the community, that you indeed are a part of the community. And you do that by not only being transparent with them, but understanding that they have to understand that you're a competent figure in the life and education of the children in the district. And that happens with conversations, and it happens with conversations face to face. It doesn't happen with emails. It doesn't happen with letters. What happens is you have to get in the community and you have to have those face-to-face meetings with those persons. And you have to be confident enough to have those meetings with persons because you are competent and you know that being transparent with those members of the community is in the best interest of the kids and best interest of the parents. So I think that's kind of a roundabout way of saying how I would foster a relationship with community members. But I think that, but it's genuine anyway.
Thank you. What are some examples of community activities in which you have provided leadership, and what ways did this benefit your district?
I'll give you one specific one that that's worked everywhere I've been, and I call it the parent focus group. Throughout my career, and I don't think I think it's everywhere. I call it the parking lot gossip. You know, things get out of hand when there's not transparency and people wind stories or embellish stories in the proverbial parking lot. So what I did one year is I sent out an invite to all of the parents to join what's called a parent focus group. And I invited them during the day over lunch. It's always 11:30 to 1. And I have a standing agenda. And the agenda deals with curriculum, it deals with discipline, it deals with safety, and it deals with finances. And I would have the standing agenda item where I would open up and just really kind of have a, you know, in coaching terms, a chalk talk with them and give them exactly what was going on in the school. And then at the end would ask about rumors and ask about innuendo and ask about what were concerns. And it's worked everywhere we've been in terms of building community, building transparency, establishing trust, and really developing a team. And so everywhere I've been, that team of parent focus group has not only been advocates, but they've been agents of change in many cases. So I'm proud of that one.
All right, thank you. One last question for me at this point. How do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement to achieve strategic outcomes?
One main way that people will engage in a common pursuit is, number one, if they understand the expectations, and number two, if they understand the why. So if you want to engage the community in Anchor Bay towards sustained professional development or development of your parents and students, first of all, the why has to be articulated and it has to be understood and it has to be accepted. That's paramount. And I think that once people understand the why, that gives human beings a reason to be part of the cause. And I think developing and sustaining improvement in a district means that you have to have that why. The other thing I said is the expectations. whenever you get a group or whenever you have a cause or whenever you have initiative, if everybody understands expectations and the expectations are laid out ahead of time, and they are in concert with the why, then you've got some magic that exists. Many times initiatives and movements, especially with school improvement or district strategic initiatives, don't have those two components, and people can tear them apart, and you don't necessarily get the inertia that you necessarily need.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right, welcome to Anchor Bay. I'm John DeRue, the Board of Education Treasurer. I'm going to ask you a couple questions here.
Sure.
What is your biggest concern regarding the political climate of education in Michigan? And as our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
If I may, I'll answer the second part first. The effect the superintendent has on public policy, I think, and I believe goes only as far as a relationship with those policymakers. So I think it's incumbent upon the superintendent to establish a relationship with local and state leaders, and to make sure, and I'll go back to what I said in the previous answers, to make sure that there's an understanding of why and the public servants understand how it is affecting public education. So I think that relationship is in the expectations too. The expectations are paramount. So that relationship needs to be built. As far as the policy in the state of Michigan, I think one of the problems that I have as a professional, as an educational leader, and personally as a father, is the accountability in school, in the accountability at the state level for public schools is a little skewed in my mind because of the variables not only that go into the formula that hold schools accountable, but the absence of really local data with respect to multi-tiered systems of support or social emotional learning, or the ability for us to understand how good schools and communities are for the well-being and welfare of our kids. That accountability piece doesn't exist, in my opinion, or it's not robust enough. And so really we're judging schools on variables that you might have schools and communities that are not only doing a wonderful job with families, but they're a necessity, they're life-saving. And so when you don't hold people accountable for that, and you only hold people accountable for other metrics, I have a problem with that. It doesn't sit well. I mean, but that would be my biggest concern.
What are specific ways in which our district should be working with other local districts to foster community partnerships?
I think that I think one of the things that recognizing that superintendents should recognize is that I'm gonna call it attracting kids or attracting kids away from certain districts it isn't necessarily ethical, but I think that we're all in this business for the same purpose, and we all have a genuine desire to serve kids. So I think that's one of the things that a conversation the superintendent should have with neighboring districts. The data in Anchor Bay is very minimal in terms of kids that leave and go other places, although it's there. But I think that a conversation with other school leaders about where they're going and why they're going is prudent. The other thing I would say is it would be really interesting to look at, for instance, the CTE numbers in Anchor Bay, which has a humongous program, a robust program. and what the county comparison is in terms of completers and the value added money that's involved in the CTE program, and whether the businesses across the community are supporting one district, because this is a big geographical district, and whether the businesses are supporting the CTE program in Anchor Bay as opposed to other districts. I'd really be intrigued to look at that issue. But those are two things.
What impact has standardized testing and teacher accountability had on our education system in Michigan?
Well, if you look at educational research, and research doesn't mean that, and studies don't mean that necessarily there's a causal relationship, but there is and has been studies, educational studies for a very long time, in the last 25 years, that correlate student achievement to teachers. And I think that number one, regardless of standardized test scores, the number one variable in a district success and student success are teachers. In standardized testing, in teachers become advocates and become absolute powerhouses in the classroom with sustained, focused professional development that is focused on the mission of the school district. And in standardized testing is outside the realm of that reality. So when standardized testing comes into play and somehow has an adverse kind of shadow on teachers, I believe it's patently unfair is the wrong word. It's misaligned. I think that standardized testing, going back to what I said earlier, uses some metrics, academic metrics, completely leaves by the wayside the social emotional piece or the great things that districts do and teachers do to support kids in their life. It completely leaves out career technical education and experiences and the world that kids live in and the world that makes students thrive is really not reflected in standardized testing to a great degree. It is tangentially, but it isn't to a great degree. So what effect has it had in Michigan? I think if you look at the back and forth in the banter on standardized testing, it's almost like a necessary evil right now. We are testing students right now voluntarily. We will never be able to use the data. And somebody has yet to explain to me why this makes sense, but we're doing it anyway. So I think standardized testing can teach us something, and when you disaggregate the data, it can point you in directions that will improve classroom instruction and learning, but it is not a end-all be-all, and it does not reflect on the importance and the meaning that teachers have in the lives of their kids.
Thank you.
This is Mr. Middlestat. This is Steve Middlestat. I'm the secretary of the board. I've got 4 questions. First one is, what is the most difficult situation you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how did you get it resolved?
The most difficult issue, and how did I get it resolved? The International Baccalaureate program is in the county. It is a prestigious academic track. And when I was at De La Salle, I recognized that was an opportunity that was intriguing not only for our students, but for our whole educational community. And so what I did ultimately was brought the International Baccalaureate program in and had many discussions with the board to fund the training that is necessary to go with establishing that program. It was not a popular decision at the time. It wasn't something that was embraced. But what I did was continually express that the access and opportunity for our students was the right thing to do. And it took 2 years, but I was persistent, and it was ultimately embraced, and we were all trained accordingly and ended up with a successful program. But there was a lot of trepidation. There was a lot of not fear, but trepidation. And we got through it though. So that was probably the biggest.
Hey, thanks. How do you lead without having official authority over all the people that are involved? Have you been in a situation in your career? And if so, how did you handle it?
So if I can repeat the question, how do you deal with not having ultimate authority over persons?
Involved in a situation.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got your line of staff and principals and staff, whatever, but you're involved in a project. You really don't have people exactly reporting to you, but how do you lead in that kind of situation? Or is there any examples of where you've had to lead a group of people that you didn't have direct authority over it, but you really needed them to help in your project or the direction you wanted to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really is. And I would go back to what I've said before about trust, and trust is a function of competency and transparency. And just think about being on a team. Just think about being a part of a cause, and just think about someone that is a de facto leader in charge of your team, but doesn't necessarily have, like you say, the ultimate authority. The way that you do that is you have to express competence, and competence comes with study, and it comes with experience. And so if you study a lot and you have a lot of experience, you're able to express competence. In this case, in our educational forum, if you're competent, you know pedagogy, you know classroom instruction, you know research, you understand the metrics and what drives student learning, and you understand professional development, and you understand how that whole system works and why it works and what the research says. So you're able to articulate that in a competent fashion. Transparency goes back to, in a situation that we're talking about where you don't have direct authority, is to explain the why. And when you do explain the why, because everybody really wants to be involved in something bigger than themselves. And that's why teachers are such wonderful galvanizers in kids' lives, because teachers understand that they're part of something bigger. They're part of doing something for humanity that is noble. And so if you can say this is why, then it's very, very powerful. So specifically, I'll go back 5 years ago in front of the Roseville staff when I sat before them, and I had to do what I just said. I had to express competence, and I had to make sure that they understood the why. And I did that slowly but surely over course of time and days and face-to-face meetings. And being transparent, completely transparent with them about not only about who I am, because part of transparency is being vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable to a degree. People have to understand who you are as a person. That's super important. And it's especially important as a leader. And just think of your own lives about how and why you would follow somebody or if that direction were presented to you and you didn't necessarily have to do it. But if the person before you had let their guard down and was vulnerable and was transparent and you believed that they were competent, you would, in the face of not having ultimate authority, be able to lead them. And I believe I did that with the Roseville staff.
Thanks. The next question, I know you mentioned trust. Question is, what are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and your board? So much of you talked about tonight is about trust, but are there any other items beyond that that you believe will help with a working relationship?
Yeah, I think the board has to believe that the superintendent will be accepted in the community. And I think the board has to believe that the superintendent will be able to establish relationship with parents and community members and ultimately the kids. I think the board has to believe that the person who is leading the district is somebody that will be accepted publicly and personally in the community. I really believe that because, and how does that get done? I think you have to, number one, understand that you're going to trust the superintendent. You have to. And how do you get to that trust? And I've already talked about that a lot, but you have to understand that the superintendent is your employee, and that employee has to go out into the public, and they have to make sure that their relationships with the public and with the students, with the kids, the parents, is going to be emblematic of what you expect. And those expectations, I believe, are fostered by one-on-one dialogue with the board, and complete transparency with the board. Communication with the board is shared whenever it happens with the whole board. And I think by doing that and developing that level of transparency, not only is that trust, that relationship fostered, but the confidence that the superintendent can go out into the community, be accepted by community members is much more possible.
Okay, my last question is, I think you've answered it in several ways, but I'll give you an opportunity to reiterate. Given your research on our district, what do you believe our vision for the future should be, and how would you engage the entire district in pursuit of this vision?
The data in the district, as I said before, speaks to success. I mean, you could disaggregate the data, and I looked at it relatively carefully, and there's questions there. There's questions that are begged in terms of certain levels and certain test scores, but by and large, I think the question is, how do you sustain it? So I think the superintendent, and I think what I said before or at the beginning is telling. You don't come in as Mr. Fix-It and you don't say, I think we got to do this or got to do that. What I would do, I would come in and find out why we're succeeding and why those test scores and are tops in the county at certain levels. But I would also ask questions in terms of finances, in terms of what we do of the whys. If you look at the transportation expenditures in this district, according to the comps, we're in first place. Anchor Bay is in first place, in other words, but it's a huge district and it's a rural district in certain places. So it's self-explanatory, but you still ask the question when there's such a disparity in data when you run that IDEX report. So I think to answer the question, to go back, is how do we sustain what Anchor Bay is doing right now? And what questions do we have to ask, and of whom do we have to ask those questions to figure out a path to sustainability?
Hi, Dr. Adams. I'm Jill Knox.
Hi,
I'm
Jill.
trustee on the board. I have 3 questions for you. Please give us examples of educational change or reform that you have initiated in your current or previous positions that have led to improvements in student learning.
Thank you. The first one is the most recent. Where I'm at currently, we have all students get free lunch and free breakfast. There has not been, when I came, a layered system of support for those students. And what I mean is an academic layer of support, and it's got to be systemic. It just can't be a program that you put out there. It has to be a systemic structure that supports kids. So what we did was at Roseville right now is we put a multi-layered system of support together that not only has an academic layer, which means there's an expectation at Tier 1 that teachers have a responsibility to do X, Y, and Z in terms of classroom instruction. And then when things get to a point where students need extra support, we push in with co-teaching. And then there's a Tier 3 that is we can call it a crisis level Tier 3 for students who indeed need immediate help in terms of not only social emotional help, but severe academic intervention. That system is primarily academic in nature, but concurrently with that, we've built in, we have a guidance team, and the guidance team is put together of counselors, restorative persons, school psychs, social workers. And what we do is we meet every 3 weeks and we look at data about how many times students with social emotional issues, academic issues, attendance issues have been, we call it touched, how many times those students have interacted with a member of the guidance team. And we keep the data on an ongoing basis to see if indeed we're making a difference with students. So that system of support is because our kids need it. And that's the most recent, one. One prior to that is developing a system, a system of education and expectation in the classroom of what we do for the benefit of student learning. We developed a guiding document that has what we call a work loop in it. And the work loop is the way we do business in the classroom and what course level teams in the classroom are expected to do and how they're supposed to do the work. The work loop starts with an expectation that we understand what our students are supposed to have when they graduate from our community. What are those skill sets? What is it that our kids need? And then we work backwards. When we unpack standards and we develop essentials and we look at assessments, they all flow from what our kids need. And that guides us. And so that system, that systemic way of doing business for educational piece, we're really proud of it. And but you got to hit both things, because ultimately it comes down to relationships. And how, as a principal or a superintendent, do you raise a level of expectation that teachers have relationship with students, and those relationships are really the catalyst to learning? And how do you develop systems that support those relationships? Because absent those relationships between teacher and student, the best systems in the world will not effectuate student learning. So those are two examples, the most recent examples.
Thank you. What do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region, and how should these challenges be addressed?
There's a couple of things that I believe special education needs to reorient itself about. And we've tried to do that where I'm currently at. Number one is access. Special education over the course of its evolution has become more exclusive. And it was never supposed to be that way. And so the challenge at the community level is to make sure that special education is an adjunct, it's a support. It isn't necessarily that special education students should be separated. And the access is really important. The access to tier 1 instruction in gen ed courses is really important in the special education world. But you have to build a system to support that. So I think that kind of shifting a paradigm to making sure that special education students are more included rather than excluded is kind of a paradigm shift that I personally believe in and professionally believe in. The model of having special education teachers work with gen ed teachers is a model I believe strongly in, rather than separate from. As sometimes in my career I've seen, just because of the nature of the beast. So I think across the county, a real inclusion of students is important. And I'll give you one metric is, and I've learned this in the last 4 or 5 years. Go into a school and you ask them, how many advanced placement offerings do you have in your school, in your high school? Let's just say high school. And what percentage of special education students do you have in your high school? And do the two match? In other words, if you have 18% special education students in your high school, do you have 18% of special educations in your advanced placement courses? Our answer is no, we don't. But it's a goal that you should, and that goes back to that access. And I think that's part and parcel, an example of how you shift that paradigm for us to serve the special ed students in a more robust way. But again, I say you have to provide the systems of support to go along with it. You just can't shift the model and not have the support there.
Okay, last question for me. How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. I really do. Think about building an educational community by asking parents and asking students about what are those requisite skills they need.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to say I was on my way and I.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Sure.
How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high-quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
That's a great question. It really is. And I think go back to what I started to say is think about going and building an educational community by asking what the requisite skills are from parents and students that they need, that they want when they get out of the educational system. What are those skills? There's going to be some academic skills, but there's going to be skills that are non-academic as well. So college and career readiness and career education or workplace education, you need both, and you need it in college and you need it in career. What I don't think is appropriate is that you separate the two and you say that you have a special skill set or skills that you need for the workplace, and you need special skills that you need for the academic or post-secondary. Of course, there's some things that are pertinent to both and unique to both, but what we should be doing is to make sure that we're developing those requisite skills in both capacities. So for instance, in the academic world, if you look at the state standards and all of the curricula, you're going to have in some way, shape, or form, the state standards saying that kids have to be able to work collaboratively or cooperatively with others. It's in English, it's in social studies, it's everywhere. The same exists in career technical education and workplace readiness. And what we really have to do at the district level in the educational community is to agree on which of those skills are important, what are requisite for our parents and our students. And then you build back and you embed them in both. And that's the way to do it, because the more you separate things, the more they become their own animals, and then they start fighting each other. So.
I'm Dennis Richards.
Yes.
I'm a school board trustee. I have 4 questions for you around finance. What is your experience with millage renewals, bond proposals, and sinking fund proposals? What is the key to the success of such initiatives?
I've been not in the lead, but have been associated with bond proposals in more consolidated schools. It's about a $150 million bond. And then in Roseville Community Schools, and the development with the general contractor and all of those bond issues, and the sinking funds that provide those amenities and extras in both districts as well. I think what I've recognized and what I've learned is it's really important to understand community expectation. It was completely different in Warren than it is in Roseville, but the community expectation is very, very important to guide what needs to be done, because what happens with bonds and the construction projects that go along with bonds is that sometimes a few persons can manage to get something from the bond that maybe the community doesn't necessarily expect. So I think what I've learned from bond is very important to understand expectations. With the millage, the most recent one where I'm at right now is it's very important in terms of the community to understand you have a responsibility to explain the why and explain it to the public explicitly and implicitly. And a lot of times the default, and the 2 experiences I've had with millages, the default is that you go to certain community leaders that are really close to the vest. And sometimes that does a disservice in the long run. So I think what I've learned about dealing with millages in the constituencies and the public is not necessarily people that are close to the vest, but you have a responsibility to articulate what indeed the why is behind the request to multiple stakeholders within the community.
Thank you. Please describe your experience with budget developments and financial management, including making difficult budget reductions.
I think the biggest experience I had was running it was a $12 million budget at De La Salle, and being intimate with the CFO there and understanding everything that had to do with budgeting. And that's where I first learned, reconciliation and understanding how that's important fiscally. When you get to the state of Michigan, the reporting and the function codes and the operation codes, those are very important in terms of how the district is set up, because the 3 places that I've been, the function codes that are kind of established by the state, which is kind of the placeholders for the money, they're dealt with differently at building levels. And so what I've learned in terms of those operating accounts at the building level, that you really have to understand history behind how they evolved and what ultimately what ultimate function code they're affiliated with. And in terms of budget cutting or I think it's important in every building that I've been in, the budget that I've worked for, you have to identify whether things are structural or not. And so what I mean by that is if you're running a structural deficit or you have an issue with a deficit that's structural, it's different than if it's seasonal or it's operational or it's temporary. And you have to have the ability to define the difference between the two. And I found that helpful in being able to make decisions accordingly. Because if you can't distinguish between the two, then a lot of times the decisions you're making might not be the best in the long term.
Thank you. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, in tough financial times, the top priorities, your students are your top priorities. And what's the biggest influence on your students? It's your teachers. So how do we take care of the teachers in tough financial times? I think the care of teachers in tough financial times is a direct product of what you've done previous. Not only a relationship with the collective bargaining unit, but the leadership you've demonstrated with the teachers. But that's important and that's paramount. So how do you do that? In the irony or the tough part about it is the human beings run pretty much the whole budget. That's where all the money goes. And so it becomes very, very difficult to split hairs in tough budget times and not touch the teachers. But that's where I would focus. How do we maintain the most important asset in our district for our kids? What are those things, maybe structurally, that have maybe past their time? Maybe structurally, in other words, what you look at every function that you have in the district, and you look at it and you compare it in terms of historically or longitudinally, and look to see if indeed those questions that you ask will give you an answer on how you deal with those difficult times without touching teachers and without impacting students directly.
Thank you. This is my last question. What opportunities might you explore to raise additional revenue for the district? Have you had success in procuring additional funds for your district?
Well, first of all, the one thing that you look at in my experience, in my opinion, is the biggest revenue source is foundation grant. So are there students that are not matriculating from our K-5 institutions to our middle schools? Are they or are they not? I mean, if you look at the data, you can ask a question, but the first thing I would do in terms of a revenue stream is to identify whether indeed that's an issue or not, and why, and what is the reason, and can it be alleviated, because that is a revenue source. That's number one. Number two, I would ask in the district, the grant funding that is going on right now. I don't know, I couldn't find it on the website, but what indeed is the function of grants in the district, and is there somebody designated to oversee that and identify that? I don't know. But that would be another initiative in terms of revenue. I don't know whether the district is engaged in shared time. Shared times is a revenue stream. I don't know whether historically they've engaged in that or not, but that's another possibility. I would really be interested in the CTE program in terms of our funding from the state, and whether we can enhance each one of, I don't think there's 16 or 17 offerings in career technical education, but whether we can enhance the funding by getting more and more students to complete the segments. So those are four.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we got it. Okay. Dr. Adams, you're back to me with four more questions.
Okay.
Concerning staff and personnel.
Mhm.
How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
Well, I think it's important, if you're going to lead a team of educational leaders, that the educational leaders understand what it is that they're pursuing and what is the system that they're trying to build, and how are they providing for students on a systemic basis? How are they providing for professional development for teachers? Why does it make sense that this system exists? And how does a superintendent take the initiative to have educational leaders embrace the why? And remember what I said before about the expectations. And so you're leading a team of educational leaders. And if those educational leaders understand that you're competent and you're transparent with them and you build the trust in the relationship, and they understand that the system you're building, the initiative that you're pursuing, is not only makes sense in terms of our district's mission, but it's in the best interest of students. And then they see the function and form of professional development that they're responsible for putting forth for our district's teachers. I think that will be a formula for a collaborative team to work in the best interest of our students. How do you hold them accountable? You know what? There's a magic when you run a team or you run a group or you lead a school or you lead anything. If the expectations are resolute and there are no discussions about what's expected and everybody understands why you're doing it, it's really easy to hold people accountable. It almost happens by itself. The problem is when a superintendent comes in and you say, this is the way we're going to do it. You don't sell the why, you don't build trust, you don't have transparency. And the next thing you know is you can't move the ship down. And the expectations are not agreed upon. So for the superintendent to come in and deal with the district's leaders and do all of that, the ability to hold them accountable, like I said before, becomes easy, manageable, and really overt, because there's both parties understand when something's not being done. I think that most recently, we have a administrative staff at the school I'm at. And I'm always telling my staff that the responsibility of a leader is to develop leaders. You don't have the privilege to lead and to subordinate. You know, a leader's job is to foster more leaders. And you do that by study and education and experience. And so what we've accomplished just recently as a team is a team where is interchangeable. I mean, we're at the point right now in terms of competency and in terms of education and study and experience where we're all interchangeable. There isn't one leader and four followers. We've developed a team who can really serve the mission equally and as robustly as the other. So I think I'm proud of that, because I understand that the importance of leadership is to empower people and just think about why you follow people. Think about why people intrigue you. It's because they make you feel like you're going to be better, and they make you feel like you can do things. And the more you develop leadership in others, and the more you develop leaders in others, the more powerful that becomes. And you do that often enough, and a district becomes empowered completely. It's really a magical thing. It really is.
All right.
She, reasonable, listens, understands, teacher advocate. Again, it goes back to that relationship. I've been in situations where there's been a mistrust between collective bargaining and management, so to speak, and one side doesn't believe the other side, and you know, everything's toxic. So I don't think it's any different with the president of the collective bargaining unit than it is with what I just got done saying with your administrative team. You've got to be, you have to be transparent. You have to be, they have to understand that you're serving the same mission. That's the beauty of where I'm at right now. I think everybody understands we're serving the same mission, and there's not ulterior motives. And once you get people on the same page like that, I think that it's a powerful thing. So I think those 4 attributes, they would say, I would characterize me.
Okay, sir. Last but not least, what would you suggest in terms of a comprehensive professional development plan for our educators? Specifically, what would be the key priority areas as well as the delivery system?
First of all, everything's got to flow from the mission. I really challenge the district to understand the mission and what it says and what it means, and everything flows from there. And every system you build and anywhere in a district has to flow from that mission. You know, and you're going to have your vision, and you're going to have your values or your behaviors that support that mission and vision. So ultimately, what system you build is got to be reflective of that. Specifically, I think that any educate, and you're doing it here in Anchor Bay. You're doing it here in Anchor Bay. You're building collaborative teams that work interdependent for the best student learning. So what happens is when you get people to work collaboratively in a system to support education, you have to teach them how to work collaboratively. And that's one of the mistakes I made earlier in my career, is that when you put people in teams, you think it's a good thing, but you have to give them the skill sets. You have to understand, and they have to understand what norms are, what protocols are, how to deal with teams. And then what you can do is you can delve into content and how indeed you break down content and how indeed the relevance of the content is important and aligned to the mission, and how indeed you expect those course level teams to work, those departments to work. And then how do you assess them? Anchor Bay's using, you know, that system right now. And the superintendent would come in, I would assume, and whoever it is, and ask the questions about how do we know what kids are supposed to learn? How do we guarantee that all kids in any class are going to do that? How do we assess students? What do we do with the data? What do we do if kids aren't getting it? What system of support do you have? And I kind of spoke to that earlier. And then what do you do for enrichment exercises and enrichment, and how do you provide for students that indeed already are above or beyond where where the rest of your students are? That system of support is common in education, but the nuances and the repetition and making it institutional is the challenge. I believe that Anchor Bay is doing a lot of that great work right now. So I wouldn't change that at all.
Okay, so we'd like to take a few minutes now to give you an opportunity if you have questions for the board.
You know, I looked on the website everywhere for the strategic plan. Is it there? I couldn't find it. Is it there? The strategic plan for the district?
I am not aware if it is or not, but
Okay.
I can get that for you.
Because it's referenced in a spot, but I might have missed it.
Sure.
And the other question I would ask, thank you, by the way, thank you. The other question I would ask is, the mission of the district is empowering all students to succeed in an ever-changing world. Was that done? How was that done and when was that done? In the vision of the district, educational excellence together. And I would ask is whether the district has ever defined excellence in because that all is really important stuff in terms of what drives the work. That's it. Those would be my questions.
Okay, I will get that back to you. So in closing, we do have a little bit of time remaining. If you want to take up to 5 minutes or so, is there anything additional that you'd like to add?
A couple of things. First of all, thank you. I really appreciate it's an honor to be chosen to answer your questions in such a great district. So it's really an honor. So thank you. I just want to say that I'm very confident that I would be able to be a superintendent who would be able to go to the community and form relationships with community members, parents, students, business leaders, for the best interests of the district and in the best interests of the board. I really have confidence in my ability to do that on your behalf as your employee. I really am confident about the ability to come into Anchor Bay and enhance the great things that are happening here and really kind of dive into the professional development of the teachers that's not only going on now, but to swim with the teachers in terms of continuing that professional development and sustaining it on a path that is understood and a path that is not divergent to, the flavor of the day or the flavor of the month. So I'm really confident, excited about my ability to do that. I think I spoke to it before. I really get excited about developing leaders. I really do. And I think that I've seen it in my career. And when I started off and I said something at the beginning of my introductory remarks, I competed at a high level when I had a lot of hair, back in the day. And you learn some things when you compete at a high level about teamwork, and you learn things about how teams function. And one of the things I learned is that teams, when they're committed to a common goal and they really don't care about the personal glory, magic happens. And it's kind of cliche-ish, it is, but it's true. And I've learned that. And I get excited about coming into a district and developing leaders and having a leadership team that is, like I preach all the time to my current place, a destination where people will come and watch us and why we do such great things. So that would be my goal, to make sure that people come here and to Anchor Bay to find out how we do great things. And the last thing I would say is that I understand, and I've been around the block long enough to understand that you have to listen to the community because it is Anchor Bay's community. The parents and the children are the reason that the school district exists. And the superintendent needs to listen and to understand their place and how they can take all of that information from listening and present it to the board and to collectively and collaboratively develop a path moving forward and to sustain all the great things. So, and I'd love to do that. I really would. I really would.
Okay. Dr. Adams, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Anchor Bay School District. The board is interviewing 5 candidates this week, and then we will let you know Friday night where you stand in our search process.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for your participation tonight for this first round.
Thank you. I have my,
So we're going to return. It is 7:11. Good evening. On behalf of the board of the Anchor Bay School District, I'd like to welcome Mr. Kenneth Weaver to this interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Weaver is currently the Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for Oxford Community Schools. Again, to reiterate our format, the interview may be up to 90 minutes long. There will be 24 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give the candidate an opportunity to ask questions of the board and make a closing statement. And we will let you know if time is becoming an issue, if there's a need to pick up the pace with response. As the board hears from each candidate and weighs this decision, it will be doing so through the lens of the candidate profile that was developed with considerable input from our stakeholders. Our intent is to identify the candidate that best fits this profile, which board members have at hand. Audience feedback may be submitted by those who are present on the form located at the table at the entrance of the auditorium. Those participating virtually may provide feedback electronically by way of the link provided for this purpose. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as the elected representatives of our community, we do value and consider the input of our stakeholders in this process. So we're going to go around. We will each be asking questions. I'm Lisa Berkmeyer, the school board president. We have Mr. Green, Mr. DeRue, Mr. Richards, Ms. Knox, and we have Mr. Middlestat, who is attending virtually, and one of our board members, Mr. Moses, couldn't be here tonight. Okay, are we ready?
yes.
All right. So Mr. Weaver, while we have had the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members here and those viewing from home have not. Please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
First of all, I would like to thank all of you here tonight, especially the board members. In my position, I'm very aware of how much time and effort you put into, and I know the pay is not all that great, and I appreciate all the efforts that you put in, as well as I'd like to thank the community members and the people that are interested in viewing at home as well too for attending tonight. My background, I think my background has given me an appreciation of all types of learners. I grew up about 2.5 hours actually, probably closer, north of here, in a small town called Hale. I was a student that was, while I would describe myself as gifted, I tested extremely well. I did not find school very interesting. I did not find it very challenging. I was able to pass classes without much effort. And really was somewhat disinterested with the idea of education. Matter of fact, when I eventually went into education, many of my teachers were quite shocked and blown away a little bit as far as that decision. But what I found about myself was that I was very good at working with kids because I understood a lot of different learners. I was also an athlete, as you probably kind of look, I'm kind of a large fellow in school, and athletics kept me interested in school and kept me engaged as well. But eventually I did come into my own, and I started to become into my potential, and I became the person I am here today. And the fact that as I started to realize exactly how intelligent that I was, and that it was okay to be intelligent, and it was getting comfortable in my own skin, I started to realize as I went off to Central Michigan University that I wanted to teach. And a lot of that came through my experience with interacting with kids. I started volunteering. I started coaching, started getting a lot of interactions with kids, and I realized I was really good at it. And so through that, I decided I wanted to be a history teacher. I also had a history teacher that was very influential and very popular with the students and popular with me. That was an influence in my life. So from that experience, I became a teacher, and At the time I graduated, jobs in Michigan were difficult. So I decided to apply out of state, and I ended up getting a job offer from Carbon County High School in Price, Utah. And at that time I took it and was happy to go. At that time, I was only certified basically in history. So I went out, I was there for about 3 years. My third year, I did very well there. I had a student teacher in my third year of teaching. They came to me and asked for me to take on a student teacher. At the end of that experience, I also was coaching football, girls basketball and everything there, and really enjoying it. But I also wanted to get back to Michigan. And so I thought in order to get back to Michigan, I needed to add some more endorsements. So I went back, I resigned my position at the end of that year and went to the University of Utah full-time as an English major. And I added English to my teaching certificate. So now I was certified in English, history, political science, and economics. And I thought I would be ready to head back to Michigan, but I guess my life had other plans. I ended up getting a job at Copper Hills teaching English. I felt I needed to teach it 1 year or 2 years in Utah before I tried to come back to Michigan. So I went ahead and I taught at Copper Hills. At the end of I think it was my second or third year, I forget which exactly, they came to me and asked me to apply for a unique program through Brigham Young University. It was an administrator preparation program where I had to take a year leave of absence because I would be interning 4 days a week as an assistant principal at elementary, middle school, and high school levels. I would do 3 months at each. And then 1 day a week, I was full-time as a student. I got accepted into the program, which was quite a challenge. It was very selective, but I was able to get in and I took the year leave of absence. At the end of that program, at that point, I felt I was ready. Plus my parents had sent me a bunch of, because now I was certified to be an administrator. I was married and so forth, and looking to settle into a career as an administrator. And my parents said, it's time to come back to Michigan. And they kept sending me job postings. And so at that point, my wife and I, we applied for different jobs, and I was lucky enough to be hired in Sturgis, Michigan, where I was in a middle school assistant principal. I spent 2 years there. My wife, we had our first child at that point. We were still 4 hours away from my parents, completely away from her family, which is in Utah. So I decided at that point to move closer, and I applied for a job in Oxford for the assistant principal at Oxford High School. I spent 3 years there as an assistant principal, where then I was promoted to the middle school principal. I spent 8 years there. And then I ended up at the end of the 8th year, the superintendent at that time, Dr. Skilling, came and asked me to move over to district office and into my current position where I am now.
You. So given your research on our district, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical challenges that our district will need to address? And how would your background and skills help us address these challenges?
Well, first of all, I think that, I've done a little bit of research. I've been coming over to this area, New Baltimore, since 2001. My sister has lived here since then. She raised 3 boys that graduated from Anchor Bay High School. Graduated over the last 5 years. I've had a niece that has graduated from this school district as well too. So I am familiar with the area, but I would not pretend to think that through an internet search or through having come over here to visit and to visit my family and that I would know the school district as well as I would need to. I would hope that I would be given the time to talk with the stakeholders, talk with the school board, talk with community members, talk with staff, professional and non-professional, and to be able to gather information and to be able to understand what the unique needs of Anchor Bay are and some of the dynamics that have been going on. What are the dynamics with the board, getting to understand you, meeting with you as well too, before I started to formulate, like, I've got all the answers. I think that my career I've built to this point, I have been slow and deliberate in my approach to my career. I've not moved too fast, even though I had several superintendents that asked me to go on the fast track to become a superintendent as early as in my second and third year of being the middle school principal. But I've been very slow because in changing states and all that, I'm working another 10 years. Plus I have younger children. I have 4 kids total. And my youngest is in 8th grade still. So I have still quite a bit of career ahead of me. So I've been slow and deliberate in my preparation for this opportunity. And I think my skill set as a leader would speak for itself, but I've been very collaborative, very much into shared leadership, making sure that I'm bringing others along. I believe leaders are not hired for what they know necessarily, but figuring out who has the right answer. I have not always been the one that has the correct answer, but I am pretty good through my career at figuring out which individual on the group, the committee, the leadership team has the right answer. And I'm also very good at listening to others. I very much believe in seeking to understand. Seek first to understand, because that's how you get to the right answer, is listening. Many times we find when we're communicating or when we're interacting with others, we're so busy worried about what we're going to say that we forget to listen to others. And others may be in the room and practically shouting the correct answer, and you're not listening because we're too worried about what we want to say. And so I think it's very important to listen to others and develop that team atmosphere. So it's very important to bring everybody together and to unite. In 2014, Dr. Skilling was dismissed from, and I understand a little bit of the background here, and I will not pretend to know everything about it and what I've read in the papers and so forth. He was dismissed by or I should say not renewed, and was quietly allowed to fade into the background, so to speak. Mr. Throne, who is our current superintendent, I did not want to be superintendent at that point because I realized that I still had another quite a few 18 years about approximately at that point that I figured I would still be in education. And quite honestly, I did not want to be that far from the kids. That has been my chief concern the whole time I have been an administrator, a teacher, has been what can I do to improve things for kids? Adults will take care of themselves. Not that they're not important, not that you don't have to meet their needs and make sure they're taken care of, the adults, but you have to make sure that you are the kids' advocate. That is what you're there for. The teachers, the paras, they have union presidents and so forth to speak for them. There is, and occasionally a parent will speak up, but many parents are intimidated by school administration, educators, and not for any reason other than there's a degree hanging on the wall or a degree in the background or something like that that may be intimidating for them, and they're worried about other things, because teachers are wonderful, fantastic people. But really, as an administrator, we're here for the children. We're here to make sure their needs are taken care of. And I think bringing that to Anchor Bay and unifying, as we had in Oxford, we had some of the same issues. We had to come behind a unifying vision and mission, and we had to reassert why we were in this business. I'm sure none of you as board members got into this to do anything negative towards children. And I think as long as we keep that in mind, and as long as we work towards some of the same goals and making things better for kids, that in the end, that wins out. That shows through, and your character shows through. Ethical leadership is extremely important to me. In the end, you have to make sure that you understand the rules, the laws, and everything else, and you follow that. And part of ethical leadership is doing the right thing for the right reason. Not only following the law, but making sure that you're taking care of the children. That is what we're here for. And I'm extremely passionate about that and making sure that children are put first.
What are the immediate challenges that you would expect to face? And given these, tell us how you would hit the ground running on July 1st and ensure that we're fully prepared for a positive, productive school year.
Are you talking in regards to the COVID, or are you talking in regards to me being a new superintendent?
I think in general, as you as a new
A
superintendent.
new superintendent in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, all relates.
Well, first of all, I would have to get to know the staff. I would have to get to know you, as board president especially. I would have to develop that relationship, because ultimately, in the end, the superintendent is who you hire and who you fire and who you hold accountable. It is the job of the superintendent, I believe, then to hold everyone else accountable and making sure that they are, because sometimes it's one thing in public schools that we're not always great at, is holding ourselves accountable to certain expectations or certain outcomes that many times it seems to be a difficult conversation in public ed. And it's not about doing it in the wrong way. You need to support people in making sure that they're able to reach the goals and the expectations you have. But in order to do all that, you first have to build relationships. You first have to establish relationships all the way down to transportation, parapros, custodians. Like today, we had our cabinet meeting over in Oxford in the transportation department. Why? Because they are just as valuable, as important as anybody else. We could not have done a day of school over in Oxford if we didn't have bus drivers. And so it's important for us to make sure, and we made that decision as a cabinet team to be there. So being present, being in the district, being at events, and trying to establish those relationships would be the first thing that I would have to do. The second thing would also be to look at, like, okay, where are we at with COVID? Where are we at with the plan, your COVID-19 plan? And are we feeling safe? Are we still feeling that it's appropriate? Is there changes that need to be made? And that would be made in regards with the administrative team as well too. And that's another important group that I have to establish relationships with. They have to trust me and I have to trust them. And there has to be an honest and open relationship between me and the administrators. They will not follow me or follow anyone if that is not established. That is one lesson that I've learned. That goes for all staff at any level, that there has to be that trusting relationship established before you can actually earn the right or earn the privilege of leading them and being seen as their instructional leader. So that would be another step that I would take. Community would be another as well, making sure to establish those relationships and begin that process. That is very important in Oxford, is to have those relationships. I've seen our superintendent does a fantastic job with it, and I've helped with it, with establishing relationships with like the fire department, the police, local leaders, community leaders, organizations, and so forth. So really to entrench myself in the community and to realize that now, after many years of being an Oxford Wildcat, I'm an Anchor Bay Tar, and making sure that I am accepted and viewed as one, because I will be representing the students and the community here in this area. Good evening.
Well, it appears to be working now. Is that there? You actually already answered part of my question in the previous answer, talking about healthy relationships with the school and the community. Can you share with us how you have gone about doing that and building those successful relationships with all members of the school community?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be visible, number one. That's one lesson that I've learned both as a principal, as the deputy superintendent. Two, it's listening. It's active listening. It's making sure that when I am with somebody, I am present, that I am listening to what they have to say. I'm asking questions about them. And that's one of the things that obviously with changing school districts is going to be a big, I don't want to say hurdle, but change for me, I guess, in the fact that I have spent 15, 18 years developing relationships and making sure that my staff knows that they are extremely important to me. Not more important to the kids, but that they are still extremely important to me, especially in these times with COVID and everything else, and being on a day-to-day basis with those children. And making sure that I am taking care of their safety and making sure they feel like they can do the best job that they can. Because many times we've had those issues where the teachers have been frustrated because this is something they've never experienced, obviously, before, and they don't feel effective. They don't feel like they're doing their best work, and you've got to help them feel that. So helping develop and establish and being in classrooms, being in schools, being at events would be extremely important. Being transparent with the board, making sure that you understand where I'm at, what's going on. Another lesson that I've learned as far as establishing relationships is the importance of communication, making sure that I keep you all informed, making sure that you have an idea of what's going on. If there's an emergency or there's a situation at the buildings, which there will be, that you know immediately, that you have that information, and that I'm not just communicating with one of you, that when I communicate with all of you, so that you all know, because you all play an important role. You are all very important instructional leaders within the district, just as well as I am. We have to work together and figure out how we're going to work and play. And that is a big part of establishing those relationships. It's the same thing with the community, as far as making sure the community understands that, having office hours, visiting PTOs or PTAs, whatever they're called here, being at sporting events, having conversations and talking with the community members, making sure they understand that while I may not agree always with their opinions, that I'm listening and I'm hearing them. Many times people just need to be heard. They don't necessarily need to have something done with the situation. But if there is a situation that needs to be addressed, I will certainly do so.
Okay, I'm back. Wow, cool. What are some examples of community activities in which you have provided your leadership? And what ways did those benefit your district?
So we're actually doing something this weekend. We do an Oxford Gives Back, where we had one of our school programs develop a program, one of our students through our early college program, which they have a requirement where they have to do like what we call is like a personal project. And one of this young lady's personal project was to develop a service organization. So we all, once a year, we donate our weekend or several hours on our weekend to help those that are in need, whether that be elderly, handicapped, whatever it is, whatever situation, they can sign up. And we go back into the community. And this Saturday, the superintendent, myself, and the rest of cabinet will be helping out community members. Another example of partnerships that we've made in the community is recently I was very instrumental, and because it goes through my office as well, but we started out an EMT program with our fire department, where we partnered with our Oxford Township Fire Department, as well as the Addison Fire Department, where we set up a program where kids can now they go through a block class, which is a 2-hour class, and they at the end get certified as an EMT. It helps the community in that we're producing students that have viable employment, as well as gives us another program and another opportunity to grow as a CTE program. So those type of opportunities and trying to be involved in different organizations and volunteering and making sure you're present at them is extremely important to make sure that you're developing those relationships. And it's an area too that I can be quite honest, other than the educational opportunities that I've had in some of the other areas and volunteering for student organizations and programs in that I would like to grow in as well too, and become more adept at joining the community organizations.
All right, sir. And the last one for me at this point, how do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement to achieve strategic outcomes?
Well, first you have to create a sense of urgency, and you have to know exactly what it is that you're going towards. And in order to do that, you have to build off of a comprehensive need, what we call a comprehensive needs assessment. That is generally the first step, is you have to assess, to have a strategic plan, to have a direction and a vision. You first have to figure out where you're at and where you've been and what's working and what's not working. Too often we go ahead and we're not really looking as to what we've done in the past, and we're more worried about where we're going, and we haven't looked back and taken an assessment of what is working. And we want to make sure that we're not getting rid of those programs that are making a difference in kids' lives. And so that's the first thing that you have to do, because that then builds a sense of, hey, we need to work on this area. We need to improve in this area, or we need to see about implementing this program. So once you start doing that, and you have to have input from all levels of stakeholders. It can't be just the administrators. It can't be just the teachers. It can't be just administrators, teachers, and paras. It has to be everybody in the community. One of the great opportunities I had in Oxford was to participate in such a project with Dr. Skilling. We did strategic planning. We brought in community members. We had 120 people in the room. We had administrators, we had educators, and we all got together and in groups, and we worked through the process, and we came up with a strategic plan. Now, we've done the same thing again at Oxford. We came up with another with Mr. Throne in the last couple of years. But one of the things that we did first was to figure out our portrait of a graduate, which is, what do we want kids to look like when they walk out of our high school? What is it we want to see from them? Not only just what knowledge do we want them to possess, but what character traits, what skills, what abilities. That was our why. That's what you have to. Many times, too many people worry about the what before they discovered the why. You need to figure out your why so that you can move forward on your what. Because there's many things. In my time in education, I have seen many things that work. I have seen many things be successful. Some of them almost completely opposed and yet still work. So the what isn't always necessarily is not the most important, but the why is. And then holding yourself to those outcomes, finding those measures. And that's what we're doing in Oxford currently, is figuring out, and we're going to put together a dashboard of data that we can hold ourselves accountable. And it's not about somebody else coming in and holding ourselves accountable. It's about us, the school board, superintendent, down through cabinet, through administration, through teachers, through parents, holding ourselves accountable to that vision. It's living out that vision and that mission statement and having values. That was one of the first things that we did as a group, as a cabinet. We established our values. What was it that we valued as a group? And then trying to hold each other to those. Because it's a difficult and complex job to lead a school district, as you are probably well aware of. Many people have different opinions, and especially nowadays, where things seem to be yes, no, black or white, Republican, Democrat, and we just don't seem to get along, and we don't seek to understand. We don't seek to find common ground much anymore. It's important to have that vision, help shape that, and bring the community, educators, everyone together to unify, to be able to have that common vision. That's what spurs on strategic planning and constant improvement, in my mind.
Good evening, Mr. Weaver.
Good evening, sir.
Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm John DeRue. I'm the treasurer of the Anchor Bay School Board. I got a couple questions here for you. Mine are revolved around political awareness. What is your biggest concern regarding the political climate of education in Michigan? And as our superintendent, how would you advocate for political action that benefits our district and public education throughout our state?
Michigan's been on a long winding path with education, and many times educators and in general have taken a bit of a beating, for lack of a better word, and blamed for a lot of society's ills. I think that in politics, one of the biggest issues that we have is it is hard to tell the true story and the successes of public education. We have one of the most educated populace or countries in the world. We have achievements that are beyond other countries' dreams. But yet, if you listen to many people, you would think our public education system can't get out of its own way. We are not great at telling our own story. That's the first thing I think that we have to work on as educators, is we have to know who we are, be proud of who we are, and tell our story and let others know what we have done and the accomplishments that we have done. We also, another issue that at least temporarily seems to be solving itself is finances. But schools were, for lack of a better term, starved on the vine, basically, with funds and the lack of. And I understand Michigan was in a horrible financial situation, but that's the future. To cut off public schools is to end your future, to end any chance that you may have of a better society down the road. And it's extremely important for us to address that, to make sure that educators, that legislators know what they're doing when they do rollbacks. And I understand at times there may be, and at times you're going to have to look for other alternative sources of revenue. But making sure that they understand the ramifications of that. Those are, to me, those are the two biggest challenges that we have as educators. The ESSA and that, for the most part, it's at least, let me just say, it's not No Child Left Behind and other versions of that at least you can live with it for the most part. It still is misplaced and puts too much emphasis on standardized testing. There are other ways of measuring how good a school district is. In Oxford, yes, we look at test scores. Yes, we look at how our kids are doing academically in that regard, but we also look at opportunities. My time as deputy superintendent and over the curriculum instruction, I have been my main chief interest, especially at that high school, has been about creating different opportunities for kids. We have 11 different CTE programs. We have DP courses. We have AP courses. We have an early college program. We have a virtual program. We have created, in a sense, a lid for every pot, trying to make sure that we can meet the needs of the kids, the needs of the learners, from the lowest to the highest, and making sure that that's taken care of. For advocating, you've got to establish those relationships. My superintendent currently, this is one where I would totally take my hat off to him. He is fantastic. He has shown me how you make sure that you're making those communications, that you reach out, that you make sure that when you have the opportunity for input, that you're able to, that you do so, and that you talk to your legislators, and that you, and I've seen that. I've met with Superintendent Whiston when he was our state superintendent. And the reason why was our superintendent brought him into our school district, because you've got to make sure you tell your story. We brought in other state legislators. I think this went out, by the way. Is it all right? Okay, maybe it's all right. I think it's all right. It sounds okay. It sounded like it was out for a minute, but yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. But it was important for us, and we brought in other state legislators, had them even speak at our commencements and so forth. And then you get that opportunity to interact with them and talk with them. But you know who's the biggest advocates and the biggest individuals that you need to get in your district to talk to the legislators? It's you. They want to hear from the school board president. They want to hear from the school board members. And so encouraging you and helping you frame that message and making sure that you help reach out, that is important as well too. Not just the superintendent, because they many times assume that we have a political agenda or an agenda and so forth, but they want to hear from the people, their constituents. And so making sure that you're able to help with that initiative is extremely important as well too.
All right. What are specific ways in which our district should be working with other local districts to foster community partnerships?
This is a difficult one in the fact that, you know, with school of choice and a lot of different things, many times districts are not comfortable working with each other. One of the ways in which we partnered in Oxford, just for an example, is with Royal Oak and Berkeley. We brought in Ron Richard, who's a nationally known speaker, cultures of thinking and so forth, and we partnered with them to share costs. So that's one of the first ways to work on, is to look for opportunities to share costs, to make sure that you're able to, if there's PD, professional development, that you're able to bring into the district that sometimes is might be costly, that you're able to share that expense. And that's what we did. We were able to bring him in several times, and it was a great experience for our staff to be able to work with him directly. And we were able to share that with other districts, as well as building programming. Many times through the ISD, you were able to share CTE programs as well. We send, not only do we have our own 10 or 11 CTE programs, but we also send kids down to OTAC, which is the Oakland Schools version of, I'm sure Macomb has its, of their CTE programs as well as looking to program with others in Oakland County. We share programming for special ed kids that you may have, you know, that they have such severe needs that there's only 1 or 2 of them maybe in the district, or 3 or 4, depending on the size of the district. And therefore you can't possibly educate them in a manner that is right for them in a cost-effective manner. So then you partner with them as well too, and looking for those opportunities. But it's really about having those conversations as superintendent with the other superintendents and developing those relationships, because you never know what might lead to something, what might lead to a partnership that you could then develop. So having that personal relationships and interacting with them is extremely important, and finding out what's going on in their district and finding out ways, and listening to your own staff, because many times they have family members, friends, and so forth in other districts, and finding out other programs and learning from each other. That is a huge benefit. Like at Oxford, we've had a virtual program now for over 10 years, a very successful one of the larger ones in the state of Michigan. And we've hosted a lot of people that have wanted to begin their own virtual program, and sharing that and having that camaraderie as learners and as educators. So there's many different ways to be able to partner with other organizations or schools and figure out a way that it is mutually beneficial to both.
All right, and then this one you hit on a little bit, but just give you a chance to go into a little more detail, is what impact has standardized testing and teacher accountability had on our education system in Michigan?
Unfortunately, at times it's made us focus on the wrong drivers. Michael Fullen, who's a renowned educational researcher, you know, he talks about having the right drivers. Standardized testing, unfortunately, while the idea behind it sounds very enticing to be able to measure a school or a school district with one single measure, we tend to like that type of measurement as humans. And we tend to want the simplicity of it, but schools are complex organizations, and you cannot measure them with a simple test score. That doesn't mean you discount test scores. They are important. They're important in Oxford as well too. But we also look for other measures and try to offset some of those, the impact of standardized testing, because what it has done is drive the fact that ELA and math are the most important subjects, and they are, but science and social studies is extremely important. Art. I have 2 daughters that are huge in choir. Like, they live and go to school for choir. That is just, and in some ways is important. And there's a lot of careers in that area. Sometimes with educators, we get too narrowly focused on everybody's going off to a university. Everybody's going off to a humanities major or minor. And we need to realize that there are so many other opportunities out there. There are so many different avenues, paths that we all can take. And we need to explore those. And so unfortunately, standardized testing has narrowed sometimes our focus. In Oxford, we're looking at trying to build around common assessments, classroom assessments, so that teachers have their own data that they're using to make decisions and instructional decisions. Standardized testing happens in the spring. We get the results in the summer. Teachers have moved on. Tell me about the kids I have in front of me. That's what they want to know. They don't want to know about the kids I had last year. unless they have the kid again. For the most part, teachers want actionable data. They want formative assessment data. That's the important data, because then you can adjust instruction. You can make those adjustments during real time in the classroom to meet the needs of all of your kids. Standardized testing is summative assessment. You can make larger, I use it especially for large curriculum decisions, but you cannot use it to adjust instruction. It does not benefit that kid that's currently taking the test. It may benefit the kid 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Formative assessment benefits the student while they're there, as well as performance assessment. I imagine most of you, if not all of you, have jobs. Has your employer came down and said, please take this multiple choice test lately? It doesn't lessen the importance of it, but we have to keep it in perspective. Performance assessment, where kids are doing real tasks, preparing presentations, speeches, projects, and not projects just for the sake of the project, because you have to be careful of that as well too. I've seen that happen, where teachers get too carried away with the arts and the crafts and the glue and the, you name it, and they forget about the instructional part of it. But it's important to realize that there are many different ways to measure the talents and the abilities of our children. To boil it down to a test, I just can't agree with that part of it. There's so much more to look at. There's so much more to my children. There's so much more to your children. And I'm sure there's much more to the rest of the children in Anchor Bay.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Middlestat. I'm the secretary of the board. I've got a few questions. First one is, what is the most difficult situation you've had to deal with in your educational career, and how was it resolved?
All right. Well, at first, I would think that I would answer this with COVID. But unfortunately, when I was middle school principal, I had a student commit suicide. Sorry. Still affects me today. I was home, ill, quite ill, and I got the call from my assistant principal. I got up, went into school. We did everything impossible to make sure our children were all right that day. And from that day forward, not that we didn't before, we double checked, we triple checked, we made sure we didn't miss any signs. How could that have happened? I took over a middle school that was considered the worst school in the school district at the time. And by the time I left, it was considered the best school. And I didn't have that. That's just not me saying that. I was told that several times. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why the superintendent at the time, Dr. Skilling, promoted me over to the position I'm in. My school went from being in the bottom third of scores at Oakland County to the top third. We went from a school that when I got there the first year or so, that I got told 3 times that if a student passed away in the hallways, that my staff would walk over to get to the classroom, to where we created an atmosphere that those kids knew we cared about them. We put an advisory in. We put in social emotional learning programs. We put in where everyone belongs. And we didn't do this because of the suicide. We had already put in a lot of those programs by that time. We still missed something we felt. We went back, my APs and myself, we went back through everything. Met with parents, made sure that we brought in programs to address and make sure that kids understand that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It turned out there was nothing that we missed. There was some family issues and an impulse decision. The young man took his life. But we made sure and did our best to make sure kids understood that they were loved and cared for, and that it was important to us to see them succeed. And we did everything that we could to make sure that it happened. As a matter of fact, I just ran into as luck would have it, I ran into the mom about a week and a half ago. And she thanked me again for all that we did. So.
Mr. Middlestate,
All
are you
right.
still with us?
Yeah, sorry. Next question is, how did you leave without having official authority over the people that were involved? Have you been in that situation before in your career? And if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah, I think we're in that a lot of times. Matter of fact, I think I lead that way many times, is that while I may have the title and I may have many times the ultimate responsibility and the accountability for certain decisions but I think I've always tried to lead that way with my principals that I lead now, my assistant principals as well too, as a team. I really like to work as a team and trying to build that relationship. But I've been in that situation with like book clubs and other professional development that we've done. We actually just did a book study on diversity, courageous conversations, and I was a member just like everybody else. I think it's one of those things of just making sure, A, that you listen, B, you have to be aware of who you are as well too. And especially in my case, I'm a large individual. I like to think handsome, but somewhat sometimes intimidating as far as some of my look. And that's one of the things that as a teacher that I always had to work to overcome. But I have to be aware of who I am and make sure that I do those things to make sure others feel welcomed, inviting, and their input is listened and heard to. And so that's how you do it, is really just interacting and making sure people see who you are as a person and that you value what they have to say and the work that they're doing. And it's important for them to not only hear that, but actually see it in your actions. And I think that's extremely important. So whether I'm the top level person in the room or just another person in the room, it doesn't change who I am, and it doesn't change who I am as an individual. I still lead the same way. I still interact with people the same way. I treat all people with respect. My parents raised me that way, to treat all people with respect. It seems to be something that seems to be lacking more and more in people. And everyone has an opinion to share and give before they listen to somebody else's. We need to listen to each other. So when I'm in those situations, actively listening is extremely important. Making sure I step aside and give others the opportunity to lead and value their work and value their leadership when they do lead, and not come behind them and say that's wrong. If there's something that needs to be changed or addressed, I will do that one-on-one with that individual, and I will save that person their dignity and their grace. I will never embarrass anybody, not intentionally. Everybody does it occasionally because of mishap or misspeaking or miscommunication, but I will never do that intentionally. Everybody is important, and you don't know who will have the next great idea or the next important idea that you need, or may have information that you need. And so by valuing everybody in the room, you are able to get input from everybody, making sure you have norms and protocols as well too, and operating in a manner that values everyone's voice. Using norms and protocols, it's just a way of organizing the conversation so that you're able to get everybody's voice in the room. Because many times people that are quiet, and quite honestly, for most of my life, I've been a quiet individual, very reserved. I was that voice, and I had a lot to share. And it's important to give other people that opportunity to share and share the spotlight. It's not about me. And I've always been I would say that if you talk to my fellow administrators, the principals, they would say very much so, that when there's credit to be given at the board, I'm very quick to acknowledge that it's the building administrators. I set the table, they knock them down. They're the ones delivering that. They're the ones that I did that job. That job is tough. I did the job in the classroom. that job is tough. It's a very difficult job. And they need the support and they need the accolades.
Thank you. My next question is, what are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and the board? What are the key elements?
Well, I think I've touched on it a little bit, but I would say, first of all, it's honesty, it's communication, it's transparency. It's making sure, one of the things that my current superintendent does is he weekly sends, like if something happens in a building, he'll send an email. But then also as well too, every Friday, and he CCs us so that we know what he's communicating as well too. He emails the whole board what has happened this week. It's keeping you informed. You are the highest level of instructional leaders that we have in the district. It is important for you to work as a team. You have to be, whatever differences, whatever has happened in the past, whatever is going on, you have to work as a team and come together behind a vision to work together to be able to make sure that anchor-based schools is the best it can be for the children. That's extremely important. I think it is part of my job to help facilitate that. Now, as a new superintendent, I'll probably also need a little help as well too. And I'm sure Michigan Leadership Institute has some services as well that I would value as well. But it's about us working together through workshops, through team efforts, through communication, through meeting with each of you one-on-one as well too, because you all don't share the same perspective. You don't all share the same background, experiences, what your children may have experienced in the school district or are experiencing. And it's important for me to hear that and to understand what your perspectives are and what's important to you, because together we will then set the vision and the mission for the school district or enact it. I know you have one already, but it's our job to live into that, or to, as I like to say sometimes, to lead into that.
Okay, my final question is, given your research or your understanding about our district, what do you believe is our vision for the future should be, and how might you engage the whole district in pursuit of this vision?
Like I said earlier, I would not pretend, and nor would I hope that you would be thinking that I'm sitting here with all of the answers. I have some answers, and I have some ideas, and I have some answers based on what I've seen work in the past. But to come in and try to say that I have my vision and not listen to other people, and not listen to the people that have lived here their whole life, not listen to the people that have educated here their whole professional career, would be malpractice on my part. Dr. Skilling did a lot of great things in Oxford. He put us on the map. I mean, I couldn't go to a conference without, you're from Oxford, and I would get peppered with questions and so forth. We had many experiences, many things that we did, some of which I think Anchor Bay has copied. But one of the things that he did not do was, when he built that vision, he did it through not the best methods. He did not take the time to build the consensus with the individuals in that district. I would take the time to make sure that what the vision is for Anchor Bay is the vision of the school district, not Ken Weaver's school district. This isn't Ken Weaver's school district. It's Anchor Bay. It's the communities. The community needs to have a say. Now, there's many voices in that, and ultimately I have to help set the guiding vision as to what is accepted and what is not, and what gets into the vision, because there's many things, like I said before, you can do. But I have to be, as the superintendent, that voice that helps decide which way we are going along with yours. That has to be done together. That has to be done through input, gathering input, looking at data, going back and assessing where we're at. What opportunities do we currently have? What is working for kids? What is not working for kids? What groups of disadvantaged kids do we have? Every school district has them, and they're becoming more and more prevalent. How do we meet the needs of all kids? These are all questions and things that have to be part of your strategic planning. It can't be just about a shiny building.
It's about the people that inhabit that building. You can have the best facilities in the world, but if you don't have a good culture, you don't have a school system. You don't have a school district. It needs to be about making sure that future generations have that opportunity to live up to their potential. Because someday they're going to be taking care of you and me. And it's important for us to make sure that they have the best foundation for that.
Hi, Mr. Weaver. I'm Jill Knox. I'm going to ask you 3 questions about instruction and curriculum. Please give us examples of educational change or reform that you have initiated in your current or previous positions that have led to improvements in student learning.
Well, I could talk a lot about that, but it is probably getting closer to the end than it is obviously the beginning, and it has not been very pleasant weather. It's typical Michigan, April, when we got snow. But let me just kind of highlight a few. When I went to Sturgis, I was hired there because of the fact that they were at that time under No Child Left Behind. They were ordered to reconstitute their staff some. So they did that through an assistant principal and removing one and bringing me in. I helped take our test scores. The principal and I sat down. It wasn't just me and the staff. And I quickly realized, hey, if we actually take this a little more seriously and we actually give kids reason to take the test, like we can make a dramatic difference just in doing that. Because like they were giving the test like here and there and hit and miss. And it was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe it my first year. Second year, we shot up. Matter of fact, if they were still giving golden apples at the time, we would have won a golden apple in all subject areas. We got rid of the No Child Left Behind restrictions and moved on. Oxford High School. I started organizing the teacher handbooks now, and I also did the master schedule in my 3rd year, as well as organized professional development, and was responsible for most of that. Such to the point that the superintendent came to me and said, I know you're really running the school. I said, no, the principal runs the school. Don't get confused on that. But I support him 100% in making sure what he wants to have happen and changing. Now, when I got to the middle school, I had the opportunity to make a much more dramatic impact. And I already talked a little bit about that. Took our test scores from being in the bottom 1/3 of Oakland County to the top 1/3. And it's a pretty competitive county, as I'm sure Macomb is as well too. We've got the Troys and the Rochesters and a few others on the block, some big boys on the block, I would say. So I was very proud of that. Implemented STEM curriculum at the middle school. All students and it's still to this day. And that's what I'm probably most proud of. I've not been principal of that middle school now, it's hard to believe, for 7 years. And I would say 95 to 99% of what I put in place is still there. And it's not just because I'm the deputy superintendent. But I put in STEM through PLTW for all kids, which helped grow our engineering programs up at the high school. I talked a little bit about our EMT class that we just recently put in. But we have added in the last 5 years, I have added 3 to 4 different CTE programs. Our mechatronics program, we took from bringing just a regular mechatronics to now it's a CTE mechatronics, and therefore has more funding, more opportunities, more classes. We've worked on, and what I'm most proud of is when I got into this position, I was primarily a high school teacher. I became a middle school principal, and we had not worked on our elementary curriculum in 10 years. I put in helped the teachers, I should say. I didn't put it in, they put it in along with the principals. We put in readers and writers workshop, math expressions. We updated, we had not unbelievably, we had not even updated really to the Common Core standards. And I know that's kind of a dirty word, but really it's just the Michigan standards in a different name. And they're actually pretty good standards. And we put that in and we adopted and we changed our practices. It was a big change. And I got a lot of concern from the union and from the teachers. Because I don't know if you know, but Writers and Writers Workshop is a big departure from And it requires a lot of individual instruction from what traditionally whole classroom instruction. But we built that consensus. We built that support. I brought in a literacy coach. Now they can't think of doing anything but. I brought in MTSS, made sure we didn't have hardly any interventions. We had basically reading recovery teachers in the buildings, and that was it. We now have a fully operational, I would put our K-5, especially MTSS, up against anybody, and I set that all up. We screen 3 times a year, both reading, writing, math, and behavior or social emotional learning. We screen 3 times a year, K-8, making sure I put in as the middle school principal, I forgot, I put in reading classes to address kids that had some reading issues that were coming through still when I was the principal before. I don't want to jump around a little bit. I put in a math class, a math lab class to help kids that were having troubles. I took over a 1,100 student middle school. When I took over, we did not have not one intervention class or intervention in that school. And we didn't have an advisory in which to build those relationships with kids. And I did all of that to make sure making sure that I had the support of my administrators, my teachers, and brought them along. I have an excellent relationship with my union president. I had to. I needed his support. I needed him to see the vision. And I've worked with him for 15 years. I would like to develop the same relationship here as well.
Thank you. What do you believe are currently the biggest challenges with special education in our region? And how should these challenges be addressed?
Well, the biggest challenge that you have is finance, and I'll try to be a little quicker. The biggest challenge we have is finance, first of all. Originally, when special ed was put into place, it obviously was supposed to be fully funded. It never was, and it's probably only funded at 30 to 40%. So that's the biggest challenge, and you would have to advocate and you have to try to make for bigger changes. But at a personal level, the biggest challenge we have is making sure that kids are in the least restrictive environment, that they are being taken care of by the gen ed classroom and by that gen ed teacher, and that special ed teacher is there to support that gen ed teacher and to help with instructional methodology, but especially in the 6 through 12 grades, that content teacher is the person that has to be the one helping support and educate that teacher or that student. And helping that relationship is probably the most important thing and the biggest impact that you can have for that special ed student. And making sure that their needs are being taken care of, that they feel valued. There is many types of diversity. There are many types of disadvantaged children. One of them is to being learning challenged and trying to go through life. And after day of showing up at school and feeling like you don't know anything, being told inadvertently, not sometimes even directly, unfortunately, that you're stupid, and getting that message. And it's about finding that potential in each kid, and it has to be individualized. That's why they call it an IEP. It has to be individualized to that child. And what is success? And what does that parent see as success for that child or their child? And making sure that that is being articulated through the IEP process and through the programs that you offer as a school district and as a school.
Okay, and the final question from me. How would you meet the needs of college readiness while also providing high quality, relevant, career-focused opportunities for students?
Okay, I think I've spoken to a little bit of this, but try to elaborate and do so quickly, I think. It's really about making sure that you have different opportunities for children and helping them. It's not about tracking kids. Back when I went to school, it was tracking. And literally, you didn't get to choose. You were told you're going to be college prep, you're going to be business, you're going to be this. It's not about the school choosing for the children. It's about the children and the parents choosing the opportunities that they want to make avail themselves. So it's about them building off of their interests. One of the things that I've done at Oxford is to really work on the career development part, the EDP, the Educational Development Plan process at our high school. So that becomes much more meaningful. Children do not understand what careers are out there. They don't understand how your education leads to a career, how there's a connection, and how what you do in high school will lead to either some type of career, some type of certification that could better yourself and improve your employment. So it's about putting all of that together from children that struggle in school and they're not very happy at school to the child that loves school and can't imagine a day without it. And trying to make sure that you have those opportunities and that they can explore those career opportunities and have that experience and can see what others, like we introduced this product called Nepris, where you can bring people in and it's like job shadowing, but you don't have to actually go to the place. Works really well in COVID, by the way. But that is an opportunity that you can explore and kids can see what types of careers and what type of opportunities are out there. And that's really about what education is really about, is about awakening the individual's potential or realization of what potential they have and opportunities that are before them.
I'm Dennis Richards, school board trustee. I have 4 questions around finance. What is your experience with millage renewals, bond proposals, and sinking fund proposals? What is the key to success of such initiatives?
Okay, so I've been involved in several of them. All of them passed except for one. And what I think is so we currently have a sinking fund. We currently have a bond, and we're doing great things, fixing our buildings up, buses, sinking fund. We're buying technology. I've helped pass them. I've helped advocate for them, helped structure the campaigns for them. So I've pretty vast experience in that regard. What makes them successful is the communication. People have to understand your vision. They have to understand what the purpose is. They have to trust. That's another thing. They have to trust how you're spending the money. You have to be transparent. So when you do get a bond pass, you have to show how you're spending it. Make sure that parents, community members, staff members connect the dots. Because many times they assume, or they guess, or I don't know, they just don't understand, I guess, and they don't connect the dots, and they then don't trust administration, or they don't trust the school board, or they don't trust the superintendent. And it's about having that transparency so that you can show where their dollars are going and what improvements are being made. And it's about making sure that those improvements are first and foremost meeting the needs of the school district and of the children, and not wants. Too many times where things go astray is when all of a sudden wants get in the way. And that also has to do with, unfortunately, at times of school board members as well too. The wants of school board members, and making sure first, and not that they're not important and not that they don't need to be addressed at some point, and make sure, but you can't put those ahead of the needs. So those are the things that I see as important when you're looking at passing.
Thank you. Please describe your experience with budget development and financial management, including making difficult budget reductions.
So I've also had experience in all of that. As deputy superintendent, I control our curriculum budget, which is well over $1 million, which that's a yearly budget, as well as I control the at-risk funds. I'm over the title funds, all our grant funds as well too, and budget for those, and have been doing that since 2014. So I have vast experience in that, as well as participating in different budget processes at a district level. In Oxford, we've been very fortunate in the fact that we have not had to cut a whole lot. In my earlier part of my career in Oxford, we did have to reduce, and we made those decisions as a group. And those are decisions that are best made in that. Ultimately, sometimes the superintendent has to make a decision, and I'm not afraid to make those decisions when I have to, but it's important for the superintendent to realize when it's going to be a decision that the superintendent has to make, or a decision that a team will make, or a decision that somebody else gets to make. And that's where you have to kind of assign priorities and make sure that you are looking at the different programs. Also, you want to take into account what is the success, what's the impact in the children. That's first and foremost when you're making reductions, is making sure that you take into account what is going to be the impact on children. And I haven't met a district yet, for the most part, that doesn't try to make those cuts as far away from the children as possible. But it's difficult when you get in those tough situations. Hopefully, going forward, you know, you always pray for great times and great financial times, and hopefully that will continue. But when you get into those, it's about that trust in those relationships that you've built up previously that you need to call on when you're in those tough, difficult situations. In Oxford, for example, when everybody else was experiencing in 2008, Dr. Skilling, we were adding programs. We went IB, which is a pretty expensive professional development undertaking. We added CTE programs then. We added a virtual school eventually. One of the reasons why was for alternative sources of FTE, because unfortunately in funding in the state of Michigan, you only got a couple of ways to make sure that you're funded well. And in Oakland County, Oxford, we are like the low end. There is only one school district lower than us, FTE. We get no title, hardly any title funds, because our demographics do not speak of us needing grant funds. So we have had to be imaginative, creative, and try to figure out other ways in which to generate that FTE or that increased enrollment. And we've been successful at doing so and figuring out how to do that without losing our purpose, in that the children in front of us are the most important thing, and making sure that when we do those things, it benefits the children that are there in front of us, the children of the community. That's extremely important.
Thank you. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
Top 3 priorities are children, children, children. Basically, I mean, everything revolves around that, making sure that they are seen and everyone understands that that is the priority. Too many times, unfortunately, as Dr. Skilling used to say, and that we're not an employment agency. And that's very harsh to say, and I don't agree with it necessarily completely. But I understood what he was trying to get across. We've got to make sure that we're doing what's best for the kids. And part of what's being best for the kids is making sure staff is taken care of. I have excellent relationships with all of my staff. When I was moved over to central office, my staff at the middle school when I actually announced it, my staff gasped. I mean, I was surprised in that regard, in the fact that I didn't think their reaction or their emotion would be that strong. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that I don't care about staff. I love my staff. I love my administrators. I care about them. I care about them personally, but I've got to weigh that with the needs of the kids. And I always put the kids there because, like I said before, adults can advocate for themselves. The kids need us to be there. So it's about putting the kids there, building those relationships, and keeping that first and foremost.
This is my last question. What opportunities might you explore to raise additional revenue for the district? Have you had success in procuring additional funds for your district currently?
Yeah, we've had quite a bit of success in Oxford. We embarked on an international program. We do not do that anymore. And I don't know where, I think you still have an international program where you're bringing in children from China. We phased ours out because, quite honestly, the quality of the children that we were getting was not what necessarily it needed to be. So we phased that out and we looked for other alternatives. One of the areas in which we have been able to raise money, or I hate to say it that way because I'm first and foremost an educator, but unfortunately there is that side, that business side that has to be there, is we created a virtual program, and we're also into shared, we also assist private schools and others with shared time services. And through that, we've been able to increase FTE and to be able to also offer a very vastly improved education to some of the private schools. Now, we can only do that in electives and so forth, but we offer them quality electives and try to bring them along. And through that connection, we've had several of these groups, homeschool groups, partner with us and partner with our virtual program. So where these homeschools now have increased and we're able to give these homeschool groups a better virtual program and support and bring a better quality product into their home, while also at the same time helping improve the financial standing of the district. And so that's what we've been able to do at Oxford.
Thank you.
All right, sir, I've got a couple of additional questions, but I did take a quick look at the clock. And what we probably want to try to do is keep your responses perhaps to roughly 2 minutes per question. I've
Just-
got 4.
Just cut me off.
Don't give me that option. How would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing that you do as a superintendent, and I do currently as the deputy superintendent. I evaluated all the principals in the district and so forth. And so building that relationship and building that support and making sure that you've got to talk to them and figure out what is their dreams, what are their visions, and help them work through that process. Because many times, especially if you have a new principal, helping them articulate their vision for their school. And then what ways can I support, and having those conversations and then being a thought partner with them. That's extremely important, to be able to bounce ideas off of and not be judgmental, not telling them you're doing it wrong, not telling them, because they're going to be pretty nervous as it is talking with their boss, just like you would be talking with your boss about some shortcomings or insecurities that you may have. But being able to establish that relationship with them so that they feel comfortable in being able to talk truthfully so that we can really get at the business of school improvement. So I would want to develop that type of relationship that I've already established in Oxford with the administrators in Anchor Bay, and making sure they understand that they are extremely important to me. And as they go, the rest of the school district goes. It's not about the superintendent. It's not about cabinet, and it's not about you. It's about those building administrators and those teachers in those classrooms. That's where everything happens.
Okay, sir. Please describe your most successful experience in building a high-performance work team. And I didn't mean to rush you, so if you feel like you want to take a little longer on one question, obviously you don't know the rest that are coming, please do.
Okay. I also aware of your time and everything else, and I'm sure you've got jobs to appear to or whatever tomorrow. So I want to make sure I don't keep you too long as well. Building a high-performance team, or I think I have one now, in the fact that we are working to develop our programming and trying to develop. When we put in when we helped put in all that curriculum and all those changes at the elementary, that was a high performance team. And I did that at the time when I took over the position. It was me. That was it. That was all that was in the curriculum department in Oxford. About 3 years ago, I went to the superintendent and said, I got to have some help. So I brought on an elementary person. I said, I'm middle school, high school. I think I did fantastic and everything. And she has kept everything that I put in and has praised what we did. So I'm very happy about that. I had to learn a lot about reading. I had to learn a lot about early math. So it's about sharing that, and building that high performance team is really about sharing ideas and sharing those experiences and sharing that work and that vision, and making sure, because if you don't have any say in the vision, if you don't have any voice in the vision, then you don't own the vision. Somebody else does. And so it's about building that together. So when we put all that in is with the elementaries and that, it wasn't about me. Those elementary principals put it in. I just helped free up and help give them the resources and help direct them. And then when it got hot with the union a little bit, helped answer the questions and make sure and build that trust with the union and build the trust with the teachers, that they understood where we were going and what was best for kids. And once that happened, they got on board. Nobody likes change. But as soon as they realized what we were doing and where we were heading, they got on board. And like I said, now I don't think they can see themselves without doing Readers and Writers Workshop.
Well, it's a good segue. You mentioned the teachers and the union. If we were to talk to your teachers union president, sounds like you have a relationship with him. What would he tell me about you? How would he describe you?
I would say that I listen, that I'm pragmatic, that I'm objective, that I think before I act, that I respect the teachers, I honor the teachers, I honor the work that they do. And I think probably more than anything else, he would say that I make them better. Matter of fact, when when I left the staff, and I don't know if I completed the story or not, but they made a video, and that's what they left me with. Their last message was, and not that I went very far, I was just a mile away, but they left me with, "You made us better." And I think that's the most important thing that we can do on this earth, is to make our interactions with somebody else, to leave them in a better place. Matter of fact, that's what I tell my own kids. When you pick friends, you pick it on, do they make you a better person? When you pick a spouse, you want to pick them or that individual on whether or not they make you a better individual. And I think I do that. And I think that's what I'm most proud of in many ways.
All right, sir, I've got one more before I turn you back over to Ms. Birkmeyer. What would you suggest in terms of a comprehensive professional development plan for our educators? Specifically, what would be the key priority areas as well as the delivery method?
First of all, that has to come out of the needs assessment that you do as far as school improvement. I believe a lot of the professional development has to happen at a local, you have to have their input. So you have to gather that through a needs assessment, not only their input, but you got to look at your data. Like for me to come in and say, "Hey, I think you ought to do this." Well, if I showed up at your job tomorrow and said, "Hey, you're doing this all wrong, I think you ought to do this," how receptive are you going to be? They are professionals. They have spent years in their profession. They should be treated and given that respect as professionals, to have some say in their own professional development and their own path that they are taking. That has to be built off of, with administrators, off of a needs assessment and looking at where we're at and what are those areas that we need to address. So I would not pretend to come in with a professional development plan necessarily, but a plan for a process that would take us to the next level, that would use input from staff, that would look at data, use input from administrators, use input from students. Many times students can tell you what exactly is the strengths and weaknesses of teachers, and you always take it with a grain of salt. I mean, good heavens, if I listened to my own kids about me sometimes, I would cringe. But there's a lot of truth in what they say, and they're very observant. And so even giving kids a chance to talk a little bit about the practices that they see, being in classrooms. If you're not in classrooms, how can you ever tell somebody else how to do it? As a superintendent, I need to be in classrooms, just like the principals need to be in classrooms. That's how you build that respect. That's how, when you say to a teacher, "We need to go this direction," they'll listen because you've been in their classroom. When I was in Oxford, our superintendent was very aggressive with our evaluations for a couple of years, and he required us to have 6 to 8 observations of each teacher. I did it every year because it was also, not only was it extremely rewarding in that, but I learned a ton. And then it's also important for teachers to observe each other. Teachers do not understand the craft that each of and the abilities that each have. The biggest resource, the biggest learning opportunity that teachers have is that teacher sitting in the classroom next to them. But in many times we put up walls and we've not allowed them to interact. We've not allowed them to see each other's crafts. When doctors learn how to be doctors, they don't just throw them in the operating room and let them go by themselves. "Hey, we'll see you when you get done. Hopefully it works out." No, they have other doctors working with them. They have other professionals training them before they actually hand it over. It's the same thing. And through those professional conversations, that's how you build a team that can handle the needs and meet the needs of all your children, because they are becoming more varied and more vast in numbers as far as the diversity. All communities, doesn't matter where you live.
Okay, We would like to take a minute to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board.
I really don't have any questions. I have tried and tried for 3 days when I first got the phone call to think of questions. Like I said, I've been coming over here for quite some time. I'm familiar with the district. You know, there's a lot of learning that I would have to do and a lot of change. And, you know, I've been a long time in Oxford and developing a lot of relationships, and I love Oxford. And quite honestly, I'd love to be your superintendent, and chosen would be fantastic. Same time, if the worst thing that happens to me is I go back to Oxford and finish out my career there the next 10 years, I'll be happy as could be. I love that place. I want to get to love Anchor Bay. I would not have applied if I didn't think so. But I really don't have any questions. I really don't. And I don't know if that's bad or good. I don't know, but, and it's getting late and I don't know what the roads are like, so I don't want to keep you too long.
It's okay. So we have maybe 2 minutes or so remaining. Is there anything that you would like to add for the board before you close up?
Just that I've been building to this moment in my career. I'm ready. I'm prepared. Like I said, I've been slow and deliberate. I have tried purposely to stay as close to the kids as I can in my decisions, but yet at the same time, widening my view is what impact I can make with kids and staff, and have just loved the opportunity. Being middle school principal for 8 years, some of the fondest times of my career. Being a classroom teacher, I thought I was going to be a football coach, a head football coach. I thought for sure that was the path that I was going to take. I never dreamt all those years ago that I would end up in administration, but I think I'm pretty good. And I don't say that to be arrogant. I don't say that to be rude or anything, but I have made a difference in kids' lives. And I want to make a difference in the children of Anchor Bay. And I thank you and wish you safety going home tonight. The best of luck in your decision. I know it's a tough choice. I've seen the candidates and what I know of them, and very accomplished. And so I wish you the best.
Mr. Weaver, we appreciate your interest in our superintendent position for Anchor Bay. The board is interviewing 5 candidates this week, and then we will let you know Friday night where you stand in our process as well. And on behalf of the board, thank you for your participation in that first round.
Thank you. I do have just a couple quick letters there, as well as like a 90-day plan. I've got one for each of you in here, and as well those that aren't here. You can look at it at your leisure and read it. I'll quiz you next time if there is a next time or anything, but here you go. I think I will take my water.
So at this point, we will have open forum. If the public is invited to comment on items on the agenda, if you would like to participate, you would to fill out the form. And of course, comments about specific employees, again, should be directed towards them personally and not included in the public forum. So I'm going to ask Mr. Sizemore if he has any out on Zoom.
There is none at this point.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at that point, I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Giroux, seconded by Ms. Knox. Mr. Middlestate, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Giroux,
Yes.
Ms. Knox,
Yes.
Berkmeyer,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Middlestate, yes.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 8:40, and we will be back tomorrow night at 5:30, same place, interviewing Mr. John Dean and Mr. Todd Bidlack. Thank you and good evening.